Hi all.
Hello. Hi.
Hi. Hey, everybody.
Hi.
Hey, Tracy.
How are folks doing in your respective parts of the world?
Good, good. Thank you. How about you?
Yeah, good. Although it's Canada and it's decided it wants to keep snowing because that's what spring in Canada is like. So, I don't know if that's a good thing because it doesn't encourage you to go out, or a bad thing because it's just so cold.
Hello.
Hi.
Yeah, Eric.
Betsy, you're back to running the meeting this morning, right? I'm not prepared to do it if anybody's expecting that, so I hope it's not me.
Oh, well, I can do that, of course, but well, I thought we would be like rotating after a few weeks. But yeah.
Okay. I that was a misunderstanding then. I thought it was rotating every other week, but
We didn't discuss how long. Like I was thinking, like normally, again, based on what other communities do, like someone takes the chair the meeting or facilitate the meeting for few meetings on row, and then that person passes the role to other person. So we have always like continuity and rotation rather than every meeting changing people. And I didn't want to ping you about the agenda either, because I was thinking you would send the agenda for this week.
Well, clearly we need to be more upfront about that.
But yeah, I can run this week and then we can talk offline and see how, like, if you want to continue with the first later for 2, 3, 4 more meetings, then we do that, and then we look for someone else to take over, and then we always bring new voices. Okay, so welcome everyone, and I see people are putting their names, and if you haven't done it, please do that so we know who joined. And this week, as you see the agenda, we don't have the presentation this week. I think it was Ramin. It was your slot this week, if I am not mistaken, but you already warned us that you won't be able to make it, so that's fine. And
I apologize for that.
No problem at all.
There's just a lot of things going on. I'll have, as soon as I have something, I don't want to just have a PowerPoint or something. I'd like to actually demo something to you guys, and there's just a lot of things going on. I'm as soon as I have something, I will definitely put together something and an actual demo that I can show you guys.
Yeah, that would be great. So thanks, Ramin. And the agenda is like the usual action item review. I don't know if we have any action items from last week. I don't see any. Maybe I should share my screen. And the second topic is the idea, Tracy. I think you proposed to use HackMD, like during the very first meeting, which we haven't had time and opportunity to do that. But since Eric joined, I said, like, Eric, maybe we can try this. And then we did a quick try on HackMD, and it looks like it just works. So that is the next topic. So the problem we currently have is, like, it's not a problem, but the challenge is we have two places to keep meeting notes. We keep the notes on Google Docs because we can edit the document collaboratively. So if someone is talking, the other person can take notes and vice versa. And then we need to migrate the meeting minutes to GitHub because certain countries don't have access to Google services. So in order to be more inclusive, we put the notes to GitHub in meetings.md file. But that is like, it is, even though it takes 10 minutes every week, it's useless time spent on syncing the notes between each other. And it is not that simple to do that, copying from Google Docs to GitHub Markdown and so on. And then we gave a try on HackMD. This is what we have now. We basically synced from GitHub repo into the project we created in HackMD. And then when you update this file, it obviously goes and pushes the change to GitHub and under HackMD user, which is also good because, like, putting meeting minutes, yeah, it's a contribution, but it's better. It's pushed by a functional user, so everyone knows this was a meeting minute update. It's not some other type of contribution, in case if you want to look back in the history who contributed what. So that is the agenda point. So Tracy, I suppose you had some experience with HackMD. Maybe you can tell us what you think about this idea.
Yeah, no, happy to. I think anything that makes life easier for the chairs is a good thing. And if it removes this one extra level of kind of boring work, I'm all for it. I've used it in a couple of other communities. And yeah, if you have a GitHub account, it seems to be straightforward for people to just update minutes, sign themselves in the same way. So yeah, I'd be fully supportive of moving on to it as the default way to capture the notes.
Cool. Yeah, it seemed pretty seamless to me too. Let's just try it for next time, and I'll pick back up facilitating next time too, and we'll just try it out.
Okay, and now the next question is, since again we can help each other during the meetings and so on. Currently, the team we have on HackMD is called SIG Interoperability, and we have, I think, Eric, Tracy, you are both admins in this team, and we can add anyone who wants to be admin to this team. So you can go and take notes and do whatever HackMD needs admins to do. I don't know how to configure this. Yeah, team settings, members. So you just reach out to Eric or me or Tracy and ask to be added as admin, or what else do we have? Writer, so you can take notes, or reader. Actually, you don't need to be a member of the team to read the notes because the notes is publicly available. You don't need to log in. You can see the notes both on HackMD or in GitHub.
It's my understanding there's a way to configure it so that the notes are editable by anyone who shows up. Because I think that's how in other communities have just kind of shown up and been able to directly add links to notes without having to kind of ask for permission. So
I failed to find that configuration setting, to be honest. That's why I made us 3 admins, because this is the first time I am using this.
Yeah, I'd certainly add everyone on this call as an admin or a writer to simplify. But yeah.
If any of you finds the option to configure the note setting as, you know.
Yeah, I'll go ask around, see if I remember incorrectly.
Yeah. So then I put agree here, and from next meeting and onwards, we switch to HackMD. And then I will put this document to read-only mode, and only suggestions, comments will be allowed. If in case if someone finds this link and unable to figure out where the meeting notes are kept from next week onwards, you can at least respond to that person's question. So this
I'm sorry,
document,
which country doesn't have access to Google services? Is it China?
yeah.
Is that the only country?
Well, that's the only one I know.
Okay.
It's always like similar thing happened with the meeting tools as well. Like Hangouts, you can't use Hangouts with Chinese contributors. So you use Zoom. Some time ago, Zoom was kind of going into some kind of issue with China, and then this was brought up to CDF talk discussion as well, like a few months ago. So sometimes these things change, and then we need to adapt to allow contribution.
Understood. Okay.
Okay. So the next topic is CDF Newsletter. So Tracy.
Yeah, just a quick update on this one. So the CDF Newsletter, the theme of interoperability, that will actually be for the May newsletter, which should go out just before May, so end of April. And I believe we've got a number of folks contributing. So Fatty is writing something on the vocabulary project, and Eric Sorensen is going to write something about Tecton and the view of how Tecton is going to drive standardization. And I have Cara Delamarque from Jenkins X, who will talk about Jenkins X as a platform that kind of pulls together best of breed tools and what the benefits are for that. And I believe Jackie also has someone from Armory who's writing about Jenkins and Spinnaker integration. So yeah, I think a lot of it is going to be updated or original content, and yeah, no, excited to see it kind of all pulled together as one cohesive kind of set of articles.
So the question I have there, like, I suppose this newsletter is not only open to CDF hosted projects and or the work done under CDF. Anyone can propose an article, yeah?
Yes, that's right. I think to a certain extent, the newsletter wants to support the goals of the foundation, which includes, you know, helping grow the projects. But yeah, ultimately, it's kind of open really to just the big ideas and how we drive the industry forward.
Can we please also include an existing blog post of me? So about Captain.
Yeah, no, I saw the post. I thought, I wasn't sure, like, I know it got posted on the CDF blog, so I wasn't clear if I thought it was going to go in the newsletter, but then it sort of got posted on the blog. So is that?
Can we do both? So
yeah.
Cool, thanks.
Let me sync with Jackie and just make sure. I think she's got final editorial kind of. She knows the number of articles, but I think that shouldn't be a problem.
Okay, so we will have probably like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 articles in the newsletter, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, I think that's more than 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I think. Okay. The Jenkins and Spinnaker one is one article about trying those two projects.
Yeah, 5, yeah, sorry. I counted and as well as an article there, yeah. Okay, yeah, looking forward to the newsletter, and it's, I think, great idea to have different themes for each newsletter, because like it shows people that CDF is active in different areas, not on like, oh, CI/CD, cool kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think Jackie's still working on this, but watch this space if she might be looking to set up some follow-up, like a panel or like a virtual panel, in which case you'll invite sort of the authors of the articles to come along, or maybe the interoperability SIG as a whole to to do a sort of ask me anything type session, or I'm not sure what state that's in, but if that's the case, I've told her to reach out to this group if she's got a date and a format.
Okay. Then we move to the next topic, the roadmap. Apologies, I haven't been able to look at it, but yeah, Tracy, have you got any?
Yeah, I've had a couple of updates, and actually, given we don't have a presentation today, I'd love to take advantage of that to maybe just open up some discussions around specific topics in there and get people's input on how they could see this shaping up and how we should drive this forward as a community. So let me go ahead and share the document, and I'll bring you all up to speed with where it's at, and then open up some discussions. How does that sound to everybody?
Good.
Yep.
Okay, so can you see my screen with the document?
Yep.
Great. Okay, so this doc, it outlines the charter now, and we've got kind of these outcomes which we want to use to work towards. And thanks, Andreas, for adding in those additional comments, which I'll go through and sort of work out how to elaborate them in the document. So I think this comment was capturing the different types of end users.
Right. So the end users can be software engineers, but can also be managers or SREs and so on. And it would be interesting, or it is relevant, I think, that we know what kind of people are using the CD tools and what do they expect, what are their requirements. So a requirement of a software engineer is different compared to the requirements of a manager. So
yeah, I think that's pretty key. And actually, there's an assumption in the way I'd used end user, which is probably a bad habit. Some of us have in CDF that, in that case, end user refers to end user company, not even those specific roles. I think it's well worth clarifying. Again, yet sort of the, as you say, the developers, the managers, and the different focus and priorities of them. Okay, so I'll look to sort of elaborate that somewhere. And any other comments on that? Otherwise, I'll just go to the next comment. And then this one, I didn't have time to pause it all. Do you want to summarize kind of the point you're making there, Andreas?
sure. The fourth point, we would like to define well-defined interfaces and reusable libraries. And in order to identify the interfaces, I guess it would be helpful to understand common tasks which are executed in a CD workflow. So for example, the deployment, testing, verification, and the release, and so on. And if we have these tasks, probably they can help us to identify where interfaces are needed. So this is the idea of this comment here.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And I like the list you've proposed. And like, I think some of these are kind of more well-defined than others. So it's almost nice to start with some of them, like, you know, just configuration changes, versus once you start getting into more complex things, like, you know, what is a cloud native application? It becomes a bit muddier. So yeah, I'll add in this section. It'll be good to have everybody's feedback on the different types of categories Andreas has proposed. So I think that fits in well. So if we go to what we have on the roadmap, we have this knowledge transfer, which is the things we're actively doing. We've completed a bunch of tools. We've got a few coming up. I think it's Flagger and some variant of Tecton. What was it, Fatih? Could you remind me?
Or do you mean Christie's?
Yeah, Christie's upcoming talk.
She proposed to talk about the pipelines let me find, sorry, I've forgotten.
Sorry, I'm putting you in the spot.
No, it's, I opened it. A Tecton catalog and Tecton hub.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I think if anybody else knows other folks who we can reach out to, it would be great to get them scheduled. And then similar.
So I'm talking to the Argo guys, but
Perfect.
tomorrow I will have a follow-up call. But please wait with listing them.
Okay, I'll put that. And then we've got the end user case studies, like the Ramin's one with eBay, which I'm sure we're all looking forward to. So I think that ties well kind of into the shared terminology publishing. And we've got, for instance, that page on the vocabulary. So one discussion I wanted to have is what would we see as some next steps? So let's say, for instance, we wanted to propose some terms which we standardize on, and we want those to be kind of pushed out to the entire industry. And if I take a really sort of trivial example, even the term CI/CD, you know, the D tends to be very context specific or ambiguous, and actually can be pretty confusing for people if they don't have the same shared reference. So let's say a body like CDF or the interoperability group want to come forward and propose, let's standardize that D so it always means delivery. So whenever CDF uses it in a shortened context, CI/CD, the D will stand for delivery, and let's agree that as a community. So I guess my question would be, how would we see that happening? Would that be something this group agrees on, and then maybe the talk approves? Is it something we should reach out to people who write the tools or some of CI/CD experts and kind of get them to advise or weigh in? And I want to take the trivial example because I think later down the line we're going to get to more but potentially controversial things around pipeline stages or different definitions of that. So, I think taking a simplified example of just CI/CD and saying how that would work, and then trying to think through that process for any kind of terminology, which we want to say, okay, this is the standardized CDF expectation of what this term means. Any thoughts?
I think if you highlight very big missing thing in this vocabulary document we have there, because we focused on tools there as usual. We all, like, as an engineers or as people work in technical domain, we go back to tools. I think we can add that, like, CI/CD. When we talk about CI/CD, this is what we mean as an additional section in that document. And then, as you suggested, we can maybe go to talk and ask their input and say, this is not about interoperability, to be honest, because it happens to be us working with vocabulary, and this is what we came up with. Does it make sense to CDF talk? Is it possible to make this more visible? Because, like, if more people looks at this document or what CDF is doing in general, more ideas and more, how to say, some people will not like things, and that is important to hear as well. So we bring different perspectives, and then in turn make CDF a real, like, neutral place for people to come and raise issues or agree with things. And the other thing you mentioned, like the experts, I think you met with Jess Humble and those guys, and I don't know, like, okay, CDF is doing marketing, it helps a lot with passing the word and so on, but this type of things, if they highlight this work as well, they don't have to agree with things, but at least if they can highlight this, then we can get at least dialogue going on. I'm not after agreeing on everything, and we can't agree on everything, and we shouldn't agree on everything, but at least just to bring people's attention. And I think this document is pretty valuable document, because in one place you find what is called where without Googling 10 different tools. And if you can make this visible, and then this can be brought up to CDF talk level, as I mentioned, and then somehow reach out to an industry-wide agreement or standard definitions or whatever we can dream.
Yeah, no, I think that would be, yeah, definitely the direction we go in. I fully support the getting the dialogue going. What do other folks think? Maybe I'm going to go round robin and we'll go next with Eric. Eric, any thoughts?
Sure. Well, it seems to me that that if everybody's been the people who have had input into the process are going to be more likely to adopt it. And so, for instance, we have the doc that has kind of the Rosetta Stone of everybody's different terminology. If we agree on which one is not necessarily the right one, but one that is the one that we're going to go with. So, for example, the one that's like, again, to start with a concrete but trivial example, that if for all the people that are writing these pipeline style tools, that if we agree that the smallest unit of work is called a step, for example, then the people that who are the maintainers of tools who need to change something, those are the folks that are going to have the hardest problem with it, because they're going to have to go back through and like either change their documentation but leave it the same in the code base, or really make the effort to go through and really rename the terminology all across their entire ecosystem of that tool. And that's going to be a lot of friction for people, and so just thinking that through, the reason why, if I was the maintainer of one of those tools, the reason why I would want to do that would be if there was some well, ideally, if somebody else did the work for me, that would be great. If I got a pull request from someone that said, hey, I went through and I at the least identified all of the places in your documentation where if you change these terminologies, it will be more standard, and you'll be able to get access to folks that are not familiar with your tool, because they'll have a lower learning curve. They won't have to learn as much. They won't have to relearn things to use your tool. And by the way, we made a pull request. That's like the ideal situation. Stepping down from that, if I could see the benefit to it, but I have to do the work myself, then I could probably go back and get on board with it, particularly if it's a tool that's a foundation kind of member, or the organization is part of it, and they just sort of agree as a term of their participation that they want to redo it. But if it's neither of those things, neither a organization that I bought into and something that I had input in, nor am I getting any help with the actual work to do it, the odds of me deciding to go through with it are slim to none, just frankly. I think that would be it would feel like to me I didn't have any input into this. It's a ton of work and I don't see any benefit. And so from our perspective, if that's something that we want to do and promulgate and we make a real thing, it's going to be in our best interest to demonstrate clearly what the benefit is, and then try to help out with those external tools to change the actual content that they've got out there, so that it's in line with the vocabulary or the recommendations that the CDF has. And I just thinking through it as a very practical matter, that's what I could see that it would the project would run upon on the rocks pretty quickly if we didn't have those things.
Yeah, no, I like your point about demonstrating clearly the benefits and ways to mitigate the friction, because I've kind of been involved with lots of projects where just changing terminology is a huge burden, not to mention kind of sometimes involves migration for end users, which is just far from ideal.
Yep. So I think and then coming at it from our perspective, I think it would be important to prioritize things that actually matter. Like, maybe is it sufficient to just have a blessed like this Rosetta Stone idea and really make that part of the, like we say, look, the world is complicated out there. There's a lot of different tools. There's a lot of different terminologies. People use different words for the same things. The one that we care about is that people can transfer the technology across tools easily, and maybe they have to relearn things or translate things in their head, but it at least they know how to move around across the ecosystem. But the thing that we actually care about is the interoperability of the technology and not so much the terminology. And so we'll just publish this this chart. We'll promote the document that everybody's contributed to already, and have that be kind of the stopping point for it. And we make a suggestion that if you're starting a new tool, or if you're working on, if you're opportunistically, if you're already renaming things or working in that space, that consult this document, and here's the best practices for authors that are starting up. And maybe that's like, it's not like going to be a stamp that we can impress every single tool into the same mold, but at least we've contributed value there, and we've made it easier for people to understand how to get started in the space. And maybe that's a sufficient goal that that we could just kind of leave it at that, and continue on with the other efforts around standardization that are of more immediate benefit to people.
Okay.
I like the word you used, Eric, like recommendation. I think that is friendly word, instead of calling this, okay, standardized terminology or whatever. Some people are not very, into standards and so on, open source, they do whatever they want and enjoy to do. But if we can go with like recommended by CDF or recommendation, then that may make people more open to at least look at these things.
Great, thanks. I'm going to go to Raman. Do you want to share any thoughts you might have?
Yeah, where do I begin?
Go for it. Don't hold back.
Yeah, having been in this space for a long time now at multiple companies, and I keep building the same darn tool over and over again. We've done this over at eBay ever since 2015 when I joined, and we have an internal tool called, we loosely called eBay Enterprise Continuous Delivery, ECD. And that has its own, we stuck to a certain terminology. In fact, I'm just using that as an example, and I'll compare that with what I found out about Jenkins X afterwards when it came along. Inevitably, you're gonna run into all sorts of companies that have done internal tools like that. And we have not open sourced our internal tool, but obviously Jenkins X is open source, and it's got its own terminology. It is very unlikely. I don't know. I don't see it happening where all of a sudden Jenkins X will turn to its users and say, "Hey, I know we called this thing a stage and with steps inside of it, but now we're gonna switch this to be called tasks," and which is what Tecton. Tecton went with three levels actually. Tasks. So you have a pipeline which has tasks, which then each task has a step. So it's very unlikely that that's what's going to happen. However, the tools themselves, like Jenkins X, and that's a good example, because what it's actually doing is translating between its own pipeline DSL and Tecton, because it now needs to produce an actual Tecton pipeline DSL from what its users has created. It's very unlikely they're gonna switch their terminology. So I'm not sure how worthwhile it is to have an effort where we set a particular term to mean a particular thing. We can do it, and we can put a lot of time into this. I'm just wondering how worthwhile it is. For things like continuous delivery versus continuous deployment, which is what Tracy, you brought up. These are, I'd say we'd be recreating the wheel. These have been de facto industry defined for a while now. In fact, I just posted a link onto our chat window here on the meeting. The folks at Circle CI have a pretty decent page on that particular topic, continuous delivery versus continuous deployment. So we can certainly grok these from the rest of the industry and say, all right, you know, we as a CDF agree to these things. That we can do.
Yep.
I just caution against recreating any wheels.
Ramin, may I respond to your the first comment? I agree to that, but the idea, the original idea with the work, this shared vocabulary, it hasn't started. We haven't started talking about the vocabulary under CDF. I think it's been like many people probably thought about this, like when they migrate from one tool to other. But this was actually, this idea came up like I think 4 years ago when we met with Linux Foundation, OpenStack, CNCF people who are involved in CI/CD, and we had difficulty to understand each other because CNCF used their own whatever CI/CD tool, Zool had its own terminology, and I think the basic idea behind this shared vocabulary is more for humans to understand each other well, because we all use different tools. You have your own internal tool, we use Jenkins or whether others use Spinnaker. And if we can't even communicate between humans, then it is very difficult to tackle with the standardization of whatever interface across the tools. And this is more, again, repeating myself, but more targeted for humans. And this Rosetta Stone is for humans. And yeah, if the tools adopt the terms, that is something we haven't imagined in the beginning, but that is even better. But I think, again, expectations, yeah, it's great, everything is called the same, but that's not the way. But at least we can share the experiences we had with the difficulty of communicating with each other and put this thing out there saying that, look guys, this is what we did to make our lives easier when we talk to each other. And this doesn't have to become anything, to be honest. So just to clarify that.
Fair enough. I'm just, once again, I go back to just you know, practical experience of having been through creation of multiple tools, which had their own terminologies. Let's say we do that. I'm just doing the devil's advocate. We come up with a standard terminology that says that, in fact, let's just say we adopt what, I'll use the Tecton terms. We adopt what Tecton has done for its pipeline naming conventions and terminology. A pipeline has tasks, which then has steps. End of story. Let's say we do that. What practical effect will that have on the tool writers of the future? I can see it myself. Let's say I go to adopt Tecton for something that I'm going to build on, which, by the way, that, as you heard last time when Christy was talking about Tecton CD, is something that it's kind of a you know, they intended that tool to be the plumbing of other things, which totally makes sense. Which exactly, that's what exactly Jenkins X is going to use it as. It's kind of using it as the pipeline plumbing. What practical effect will that have on people who are creating things, and what will it have on people who've already created stuff? I was just bringing up the point that even if we achieve what we're planning on achieving, I'm not sure how much value it will have from the amount of time we would have put into that. Again, just playing devil's advocate here. I'm not suggesting one way or another. That's all.
Yeah, and I think to that point, I think there's just this idea of confusion. Like, I think people don't even know that the terms are different across tools. So if you stay in a world with just one tool, I think you're fine. It's just irrelevant to you. But the minute you start saying, okay, I might need to potentially move my tools around, or I want to move workloads around, it gets very confusing very quickly. And even if we don't have everyone using the same thing, maybe just having the reference, you know, something like CDF saying, okay, reference is, we're going to treat Tecton terms as the reference one, so we can talk about other tools. So when you say, okay, I'm doing something in GitHub Actions, this bit in GitHub Action is equivalent to the Tecton's other bit, and it becomes maybe just a way for people to communicate better and not be talking at odds when they're each saying something like pipeline. So I guess that's how I would see it, just yeah, simplifying the conversations.
Fair enough. And I yield to the overall decision of this committee.
Let's keep going around and getting just other opinions. I'd love to hear from everyone. So Emily, do you have any thoughts you'd like to weigh in?
I'm trying to wrap my head around what my opinions are. So, like I understand the point of not everybody is going to change. If we set the recommendation that says we go for this one, it means this. I see Eric's point there, and Ramin as well, that people, or rather companies, I guess, are set in their ways, in the sense that they would, even if we bring them, we say that this is the benefit and you get all of this, I'm not sure it still would help much if we expect them to change, that is. I'm more leaning towards what Fatih mentioned, to have this human language, at least as a cheat sheet, if you will, to have this glancing at it. Then it would still be good, I think, to bring it up to the talk, since it still, I feel it covers more than just the interoperability. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I think I do get it. Thanks for sharing that. Andreas, anything you want to add?
I also agree that this is a nice mapping for our human language between the different terms, but I'm wondering whether it is really the most difficult tasks for engineers to understand those terms. I think people have much heavier problems in implementing then the actual stuff, the actual deployment, and so on. And they do not struggle that much with the different terminology, because they choose one tool and then they start implementing their pipelines or their continuous delivery flow. And here they spend most of their time and not understanding the terminology. So I agree, having a common terminology is useful, because this will help us to talk to other people, but I do not see the biggest challenges here.
Can I speak to that point as well, Tracy? Sorry to.
Yeah, no, please do.
Because again, if I go back to communities I was contributing to, and I am still contributing to, I think one thing that is clear is like all this cloud native virtualization, containers, microservices, all this transformation happening. The things are not that as simple as before. Previously, you had like monolith, you had like one tool with pipeline, you build everything in-house, you run through that pipeline on Jenkins possibly, and you have a release in that. But in today's world, the majority of the new products are developed using open source technologies, for example. And all these open source communities use different tools and technologies to run their pipelines. And if you think about integrating these things as a company like Ericsson, just sorry to give my employer as an example, you hook into at least 10 different communities and 10 different tool sets there. And what in CNCF doesn't map to what is called in OpenStack or Open Daylight or OpenFV. And it gets explosive. Like I am not developer, I am not a contributor to Tekton or Jenkins. I am a user, and if I look at from user's perspective, it is very difficult to wrap my head around, like, okay, how can I integrate these cool technologies in my company so I can build a product on top of it? And I can't even bring those things together because, like, there is no way to map one thing to other, even in my head, before getting our hands dirty by building a pipeline internally. So that is, we've been through there. And again, the CNCF CI, cross-cloud CI, if you are aware of CNCF cross-cloud CI initiative, they are hooking into ONAP community, they are hooking into OpenFE, they are hooking to CNCF. They're all different. And just 3 communities make your life very difficult. They are doing great jobs, but they pick and choose their own tools, which is great. But in the end, the people who try to consume them suffer. And that is kind of this vocabulary. Again, I am not trying to defend the vocabulary, but just trying to highlight the challenges we face. Every little, like Tesco thing, you know, any little help or whatever. Like, I see this as a little help to those people who are struggling to map things with each other when they talk. So that is, again, trying to look at things from user's perspective.
Yeah, thanks for that, Patty. I think for me, there's, like, we talked a lot about kind of pre-existing tools, but I think there's also lots of emerging tools. And I think part of the effort should be kind of getting ahead of those tools. So when we're talking about newer concepts, like perhaps something like deployments, you know, are we going to use blue-green deployments in Spinnaker? What does that mean? What is the definition of a canary deployment? Maybe going into feature flags or things around any kind of new kind of, you know, area that's emerging. You have things like progressive delivery. You know, how do we make sure that we can help people understand what the different terms are, or what, as each tool kind of comes along, how these things map to each other? And for the new ones, I can see more value in kind of trying to get ahead of it and just sort of say, okay, actually, we're going to go with these terms and everything can derive from that. So we try to stop or influence, to a certain extent, tool developers from kind of just coming in and going, actually, you know what, I'm just going to make up terms based on kind of my reference points and what I think is right. So I guess that's part of the motivation, perhaps. Okay, and no one's interrupted me, so I'll keep going. Just on the CI/CD point, I think for that, it's not specifically looking to redefine the terms at all, but more specifically just establishing the very simple idea of the de facto definition, or the de facto assumption that CI/CD will mean delivery unless specifically stated. And I think it might be a small distinction, but I certainly know for myself, coming into kind of this new area, and for other people, and just talking at odds with people who had different definitions or different understanding, I think in some cases just saying this is the, you know, this is the reference, or this is the assumption I'm making, and here's where it's defined. So I think it's a little helpful.
I totally agree, Tracy. If we're limiting this particular endeavor to listing out what has already been industry accepted, terms that have already been industry accepted, you say one thing, everyone across the board who's ever even been in that space agrees that that's what that term means. Putting those down, worthwhile effort, and as a CDF, Continuous Delivery Foundation, it's great for us to put it down, expose it, and say this is what we mean when we say this. So I agree with that. My only caution was against attempting to come up with some of the more nitty-gritty details, like, for example, say, you know, what is a stage? I'll just use that as a, the term that Jenkins X uses. The equivalent of stage is a task in Tech Talk.
Yeah.
You know, can you imagine that conversation? We want to standardize on. Again, I'm jumping ahead to the actual implementation. I'm an engineer. I go directly to the implementation. Can you imagine that conversation? Hey, we're going to standardize on the word stage. Really? We already called it. It's a task. Well, why can't it be a stage? Because a task. I mean, didn't you just go down? You know, you rat hole into that.
Yeah, and naming biggest problem. Yeah, no, I agree. I think we want to avoid that.
Yeah.
Having said that, I will give an example of where the Jenkins community did kind of dump the term workflow and migrate using pipeline. So I know it can be done in the right circumstances, but yeah, I'm not sure. Like in that example, not all of them are worthwhile, and it's probably more trouble than it's worth.
Right, and so I'm cautioning us against, or I should say, I want us to lean towards those things that we already absolutely know are de facto terms, and putting those down, and so that no one ever, if anyone, like right now, if you want to ask the question, what is the difference between continuous delivery and deployment? Okay, frankly, if I Google that, the CDF de facto, the CDF terms should be the very first thing that come up.
Yeah, no, great point.
Yeah, and then the details of that stuff, like everybody agrees what a pipeline is. Everybody. There's no argument as to what a pipeline is and how it's supposed to function. Those things, I think we can put those down and get a lot of value out of it.
Yeah, no, that sounds good to me. Okay, any other thoughts? I think this is giving me, just kind of listening to all the different perspectives. Yeah, it's giving me some clarity about how we can approach this and what's worthwhile to do, and how we can talk about the efforts as we try to get more visibility. Okay, if nothing else, I'm gonna leave it there. And yeah, no, thanks for all your input. Okay, back to you, Fatih.
Great discussion, because like in previous weeks we had like presentations, we didn't have time to, you know, deep dive into these things. So I enjoyed the conversation, to be honest. Like, thanks for contributions from everyone. So I think that was the last agenda item. So anyone has anything else to bring up? We have 7 minutes. So? No? Okay. Then the next meeting will be on April 30th, and we will have presentation from Stefan from Weaveworks on Flagger. So I don't know what Flagger is, but it looks cool when I Google it. So please join to the next meeting and then see what it is about, and then we continue with roadmap, and we'll hopefully see the newsletter around that time, end of April or not, we'll see. And thanks a lot for joining today, and keep safe and be healthy, and talk to you in 2 weeks.
Yep, and Fatih, I'll sync up with you and make sure that we do a better handoff next time. I'm really sorry about
no problem at all. No problem at all. Yeah, we talk offline. Thanks a lot.
Yep. All right,
thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.